My name is Alyssa Ralston. We are here with Tim Nickerson, an alumnus of 2001. It's May 2nd, and we're at Nicholson Library at Linfield University in McMinnville, Oregon. Tim, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. I'm just going to start off with a huge softball and tell us about your Linfield experience.
Well, I guess starting out, I grew up in Yamhill County. So I'm from Sheridan, and my family has lived in the West Valley since the late 1800s, 1870s. Mostly farmers and loggers, including up until to my dad as well. He worked in the steel mill here in town, and forever I was always known that I was going to go to college. It was never a question. So it was just always that way. Even when I was before getting into kindergarten, it's like you're going to go off to college, and you're not going to be working in the hills or in the fields or in the mills. You're going to be doing something else. And so I went to Sheridan High and graduated and applied at a handful of schools. Of course, Linfield being one. And Linfield had, I guess, a special place for me because we would always come to McMinnville for grocery shopping. So once a week we'd come through. And I remember my parents, when we'd drive down 99, they would look over every once in a while and say, well, there's Linfield, and that's a good school. And if you work hard, you might be able to go there. You might be able to get a full ride scholarship. You might be able to be admitted and go there. So that was always in the back of my mind. And when it came time to apply for schools, I'm like, well, of course I'm going to apply for Linfield. And I applied at a couple other schools in Oregon, and one on the East Coast, and one in Seattle, and I think Linfield came back first. And financial aid made sense, and it's like, okay, that has the programs I'm interested in. Let's do it. I think I made that early decision before I got the rest of the information back from the other schools. So this was just going to be my next step. And it was close enough to home that I felt it was comfortable, but far enough that I was still branching out a little bit. And when I came here, I didn't really know what I wanted to study. I had a really interesting US government class my senior year of high school. So I was really more interested in politics, and not so much the US system, but international systems. And I back when I was a senior, you'd get the book from Linfield that had all the classes listed, and I would sort through them all, and I got to the political science section, and some of those classes were just so fascinating. It's like Intro to American Politics, maybe not so much for me at the time, but international relations and nationalism and great political thinkers. It's like, that's just so fascinating. And so I got on campus, and then when you selected classes, you went to the gym, and they had the professors sitting at tables, and you'd walk around with your piece of paper, and you'd go talk to the professor, and they'd sign you up for the class, and then before you left the gym, you'd give it to the registrar, and they'd enter it in the computer. And I walked over to the political science table, and I was pretty sure I knew I wanted to do this, but I also had my parents' thoughts in the back of my mind saying, you're going to school, and you're not going to be working in the fields or the mill or something, but what am I going to do with a political science degree? So I asked Dawn Novatsky that question. And she turned and she's like, well, in political science, we're not going to teach you a trade. You're not going to learn to be an accountant or a teacher. You're not going to have a clear job you're going to get as soon as you leave Linfield. But what we will do is we'll teach you to think. And that right there was like, all right, that's one amazing sales pitch, Dawn. And then she continued that we're going to teach you to be critical thinkers and basically like real global citizens. And like, all right, you got me. Totally buying this. I love it. So I signed up right then, knew I was going to be a poli-sci major. And most of my classes in that department were taken with Dawn. So I argue jokingly that I didn't major in political science, I majored in Dawn Novatsky. So it was a really interesting experience taking a high school government class that the teacher had taught probably unchanging since my dad took the class from him 20 years prior that really stirred me to want to take that step and talk to Don and go down the political science path. One of the things that I often talk to students about is how much I hated Linfield when I got here. I didn't feel like I fit in. I lived on campus, of course, because I wanted the proper experience. My parents had that idea as well. Like, yes, you can save some money and you can have it, make it maybe a little easier for us, but that's not the full college experience that they were anticipating, that they probably wanted themselves. So I lived on campus and I worked off campus and I worked on campus and I studied and I took a full load of classes and I just felt it was just, not say going through the motions, I was just so focused and not enjoying it. And I made a decision to transfer. And so I started filling out the paperwork and I stopped and I was like, I can't just leave because I don't think I've given everything I can and expecting something better, right? I'm not actually going all in. So like, okay, let's figure this out. And I sat with my parents and like, okay, we can get rid of that other job and you can just do your stuff on campus and focus on this. And then I really loved it. I mean, I was really spending time here, meeting more people, getting more involved with clubs and student government. And I think I really found, the proper friend group and the things that really interested me. And thinking back, I just can't imagine transferring to U of O or an Oregon State or something. It doesn't seem like me. I don't think, I might have been happy here that first semester or two, but I really don't think that I would have been successful in a bigger university, being one of 50 or one of 250 in a class. I don't think that would have been me at all.
Going back to that decision to not transfer, because I think I see a lot of students here that want to be involved in everything. And I think, your time is finite and maybe sometimes it's not fun to be involved in everything and you have to pick and choose. Can you talk to me a little bit more about, was there a moment when you made that decision where you thought, where you sort of all became clear that, if I drop this or if I do this, things are gonna coalesce for me? Well,
I think the thing that I was giving up most the first semester and a half when I was working off campus and on campus and taking a full load and still trying to be a college student and learning, meeting new people and everything else. The thing that was missing in that equation was taking all the time to actually study and the real reason I'm here. And it's like, this is going to be a really bad situation if I'm focusing on the wrong priorities right now. And I don't leave with a degree, but my parents have worked so hard or my dad's working overtime at the mill to help pay for this. And all of a sudden I'm not able to deliver on this promise that I made. And I think when I just started taking things away, it just seemed to fit more, like the puzzle pieces just came in and I'm enjoying this club more and I want to be more involved with this group of people and they're involved in this sort of organization. And I think that's really how I got involved with student government. I started with some clubs and the people that were involved in those clubs that I really meshed with were out actually doing more stuff with student government. And at that point when I'll be a senator and I'll be club president or I'll work with the ASLC committees in cabinet and the like. And those people that I met in that initial period after I've re-centered myself, I'm still close with today. For example, just a few weeks ago, I was in DC for work and I met up with a couple people that I met in that time frame for dinner and some drinks. And it's like how interesting one decision of quitting that job and refocusing on that, going to that one club that one night can make such a positive impact 25 years later.
Yeah. Is there anything particularly from student government that is memorable to you that you'd like to put in the record?
I think finding your people, and for that, finding just the certain level of nerdiness in some of the student government people. Some of us had a mission. There was one person that we didn't think was doing what they needed to do on cabinet. They weren't fulfilling their roles. We spent so much time trying to find a way to get them removed from office. And it's like, that's not really, it's not really the healthiest thing, but that's how we bonded. We were going through the bylaws and reviewing all sorts of things. And then, we found that, we have the same sort of values and mission, and we can work together to really move not only ASLC at the time forward, but the student experience forward as well.
Any special friendships that you made at Linfield? I know you just referenced going out to drinks.
I would say Eric Deffenbaugh is probably one of my closest friends, and I met him through student government during his political campaign to be student body president. I helped on that campaign. Mostly because I figured he was going to win, and I wanted to have that friendship parlay into, maybe a cabinet position or something else. It's the Chicago politics.
Strategic.
Exactly. And it's one of the things we just hit it off and became quick friends, and have been friends ever since. He was my best man, and I was his best man. We've traveled all over the world together. When he joined the board right around the same time I did, it was just one of those, we have the same values. We had basically the same Linfield experience, and how it changed us, and wanted to keep that happening for students in the future. And I would say the other friendship group comes from my travel abroad experiences. I took 2 JAM terms, one with Professor Novatsky, of course, and one with a mass communication class. We spent time in London, and being thrown together in a situation where, at least with Dawn, we didn't speak the language. It was 1999, so 10 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we were in parts of Eastern Europe, and spending all day with these students researching and reading and discussing. The course was on women's politics, so everything from feminist theory to issues with the daycare system in the Netherlands and Germany and the Czech Republic. And just being in those situations, I think, helped bring you can figure out which people you're going to mesh with a little better. And I wouldn't say it was a stressful situation, because it was a great Jan term experience, but everything is new, and you're having to rely on people you may never have met before. It's a small school, but you might have never had classes with these people, and now you're relying on them to help make sure you're on the right train going somewhere, or helping you navigate the city itself or understand the coursework. So I think it's sort of like it's an accelerator to a friendship, or can be an accelerator to the destruction of a friendship. If you go on my second trip, we had several people who were good friends before the trip, and they roomed together, and they were not that close afterwards. It was a tough experience, and it actually happened on both of the trips. So on my second trip, a friend was asked if we would room together. I said, absolutely not. I want to still be friends with you, and it won't happen. We are.
So we talked about Professor Novatsky, obviously. Are there any other professors or mentors that you had on campus while you were here?
I think I was a double major, so political science and mass communication. My communication advisor was Bill Lingle, and he's the one who took us to London for a month. We studied British mass communications, and he was such an Anglophile. He put together such a great trip where we could spend almost the entire time in the city of London. And that was my first time spending that much time in a major city. I've traveled a little bit before, and then a few days in different cities on that previous Janterm trip. But we're living in London, and we're getting to know, we're commuting everywhere. I think that's how I really knew that I really loved big cities, and it might be scary, daunting, terrifying, but I can do it. So I really appreciate that. And I think the other mentor has to be Jeff McKay, student government advisor. While he was before our time, he had the same sort of Linfield experience. He came from a rural area here, took on several leadership roles at the institution, and it changed his life. And I felt I could go to him with any question I had, whether it be official student government related, or personal, or academic, or anything. And he was always there, always offering good advice, but definitely more of a guide and not, this is what you need to do. It's like, what do you think you need to do? Which was frustrating at the time, right? It's like, I just need you to really help. And he's like, basically you have the answer, you can come to it on your own. And I would say after I graduated Linfield, I kept in contact with Don, Bill Lingle a little bit, and Jeff not so much for a long time. And then I'm not sure what, maybe coming back for IPNC every summer I saw him there, but we were chatting all the time, and it's just, I feel it's a shame that we didn't keep that relationship going, but when you get back into it, it's like no time had passed, and working with him on the board as a member of the administration, it's really great to see the passion he has and Don has for the institution and for the students. And I didn't see that when I was a student, because that's just who they are. And when you step back and move 2,000 miles away and you look at how things are changing, and then you reconnect with professors or administrators, and they're still passionate and excited, and their number one focus is the students. And it's like, I'm sure it was the exact same way when I was here. I just didn't see it, didn't have that visibility.
So when you were on campus, living on campus, what was a typical weeknight like in the late 90s and early aughts, or a typical weekend?
That is such an interesting question, and I have to say, thinking back to what a typical weeknight or weekend night was like is probably the hardest question you have on that list. I look back, and when I think back about early part, we spent, my big memories are going to concerts in Portland, so not on campus, and then a little later on is going to different clubs in Portland, maybe not rock clubs or something like that. And I know there were Greek events a few times a semester, but there's a lot of weekends and weeknights that I just don't really have a firm memory of what we did.
Must have been fun.
Yeah, maybe. And I do remember spending a lot of time with the people. I don't necessarily remember the activities. And I was actually asking friends I met in DC a couple weeks ago about that, and they were like, oh yeah, they started going off on these paths, and they never actually answered the question. It was like, but we had a good time. The only thing that really stands out that was a consistent thing was on Thursdays, one of the people in my class, he would play Dave Matthews cover band songs at the at Golden Valley on Thursday. So we would go down there every Thursday and have some beers and listen to the same songs, and which is funny because I wasn't at the time, and I'm not really now, a Dave Matthews fan, but it was just one of the things we did. And my memory is that everybody was there, but it was probably 10 or 15 of us. So I really tried to come up with the answer to that, and I just don't know what we did.
Again, it must have been fun if it's not coming back to you. Tell me about being the first person in your immediate family to graduate from college. We have a pretty large first-generation population now, so.
Well, I think for me, I wouldn't say there was a lot of pressure. It was, this is just what's going to happen. And there was never a thought that it wouldn't, like you can't do it, you're unable to do it. It's like, this is just, you turn 16, you get your driver's license. You turn 18, you graduate high school, then you're going to go to college. It was just one of those things. For me, I think, and I don't think I realized it at the time, one of my struggles was, figuring out how I fit into this whole place. Like I said, with jobs and with studying and with friends. And when I was feeling overwhelmed, I didn't really know who to go to. I definitely didn't feel I could go to my parents, because I felt they're already sacrificing so much, and I'm going to come in and complain that, oh, I don't have enough time to do this, or, and they would have been supportive, but I don't think they would have really known how to support, other than thinking that I got an opportunity that nobody else in the family has had, and they wouldn't have said don't squander it, but it's like they wouldn't have had the resources to help what we need, what I needed at the time. And it was a handful of years ago, President Davis sent out an email and was talking about some additional resources for first-generation students, and I immediately fired off a note to him and saying, I didn't know this need really existed. I know that you've articulated. I totally needed that when I was here, and that's something that I think so many students have needed throughout the years, and I don't know if, and maybe it was a resource that was available when I was here, and I just didn't know about it, or I felt uncomfortable to ask for help for that. I've had, in my professional life, I've had several interns that are also in the first generation students, and I always ask them that same question. And things have changed, because their universities, they've all have more of a robust support system for first generation students. And I always ask them, well, could you go to your parents? And if I can go to my parents, but I don't feel I could ever really do that, because they're already sacrificing so much for me to be here.
So what were your plans post-graduation, and how did those manifest?
Well, being a poli-sci major, so many people that I graduated with, one of their goals was either grad school. I knew I did not want to go to grad school, and it's not the idea that, oh, I've done so much formal school, I just don't want to do it anymore. It had never crossed my mind that'd be something I would want to do. I knew I didn't want to go to law school, which many of my fellow students did, or go get a master's in poli-sci or some iteration of that. Just never was on my radar, something I wanted to do. But the folks who weren't going for additional education, most of them wanted to work in the nonprofit world. And I felt bad saying this, but I said, I do not want to do that. I want to work in for-profit corporation. Because I know you're going to, for me personally, I was thinking, you're going to be working for a great mission at a nonprofit, probably. You're going to be working 1 million hours, and you're not going to be making much money. I said, I'd rather be in a situation where I'm making more, working the 1 million hours still, whatever it is, being able to give back to organizations that I really like. So I knew I didn't want to stay in this area, which was, I think, a struggle for my parents. The first person in the family to pick up and head east in 150 years almost. But I knew I wanted to live in a real city, and I think after that Jantram trip in London, I knew that I could do it. And in my mind, then and now, a real city for me is a place where I don't need to have a car. I can get anywhere in the world in 2 flights. And at that time, I also wanted to stay in the US. And I don't know if I had formalized that thought, or I just never took the next step to say, why do I have to be here? Why couldn't I go to Europe or Asia or something? And I chose Chicago because I just didn't like San Francisco. I had no real reason. And honestly, I was too much of a wimp to try New York. And I'm like, okay, I'll give Chicago a try.
Had you been to Chicago?
I had been to Chicago only at the airport, only to visit when we were connecting to see my mom's parents in West Virginia. But when I told my parents that I'm moving to Chicago, they both looked at each other and laughed. And I was like, what is this? And my dad said to my mom, I told you. And my mom said, do you remember when one of your first plane trips? I was like, well, no. And she said, we were connecting in Chicago and you looked out the window and you said, Mommy, I'm gonna move there. And she said, you've always been so stubborn. We knew you were gonna move to Chicago at some point and you've never brought it up in years. And they just thought that was hilarious. And I didn't have a job. I knew one friend who was graduating with me that was moving to Chicago as well. And again, we decided not to be roommates because that would destroy everything we thought. And we picked up and moved to Chicago and ended up moving in the same building. I bought a round trip ticket.
Just in case?
Just in case. It was like, I think I had 4 or 5 months from the return. And I was hoping I would just waste that money on that return ticket and never need it. And before I left Linfield, I went over to talk to the career services folks and Christy McKay, and I told her what I was doing. There's a book in their office called How to Get a Job in Chicago. They had one for like every major city in the US, and I was like, that's strange. And then she also got me a list of every Linfield alumni from Minneapolis to St. Louis, and there was probably 80 to 100. It had, well, they all had phone numbers. Not all of them had email addresses. This was 2001. So I emailed the ones that had email addresses, and I called the rest of them. I called and emailed every single one of those people. Almost every one of them got back to me, and everyone in Chicago set up some time for a lunch, or many of them set up time for an informational interview and a day job shadowing. No jobs ever came out of that, but it was interesting to see what people from Linfield with a liberal arts education can do in massive international companies. I mean, here, if you're in the Portland area, everybody knows Linfield. And likely, you know somebody who went to Linfield. In Chicago, that is not a thing. So it made me feel much better. And so now whenever I hear anybody's wants to move to Chicago, I'm the first one on the phone with them, or anytime I'm talking to a student, they're toying with the idea of moving where they don't have a familial support system and they're not sure if they can do it. I just want to grab them by the shoulders and yell, you can do it, just do it, you can try it and it'll be fine, and call your Wildcats in the area and they'll help you out, I guarantee it. But my first job in Chicago was at a nonprofit. And I think it was the perfect opportunity for me. I was temping because I just needed to pay rent. And after a couple temp jobs, I got a job working at the Chicago Architecture Foundation, answering the phones and booking tours for people. And that was in August of 2001. And so that department I was in was the fundraising department, development and advancement. And fast forward a couple weeks, the 9/11 terrorist attack, nobody is hiring. I'm just happy to have this job. And nobody's taking tours either at that time, but they saw me more than just a person answering the phone to take tour reservations. So they moved me into more of a development function, which was really tough because we had no idea what was going on in the world. And philanthropy dollars were drying up and they were being redirected to things more fitting for that time. And it was tough. It was like I initially thought. It was many, many, many hours, lower pay, and it was a good mission, I think, because the mission of the organization is really to help Chicago-based students understand architecture and put architecture education in school systems and really lift students. So I stayed there for a year. And I got a call one day from an insurance brokerage. They said I'd applied for a job. I did not remember that. This was back when you'd get the paper from the Chicago Tribune and the classifieds and you'd circle them. There was very few online job boards. And I applied. I probably faxed my resume to these people the year before, and they called and said, we want to talk to you about a position to work in our mailroom. It's like, I don't know anything about insurance. And I'm like, well, can you push a cart? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And so I went over and had an interview, and it really was a training program to, get on the ground floor and learn everything and then move up. And it's like, sure, I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I know that I'm not really happy at the institution I was before. So I made that move. But I think the timing for me was perfect working at the nonprofit, because I was working with so many people at architecture firms and other civic organizations and the city itself. I got to build a really solid network of people who were socially and civic minded, and a guy coming in with a Rolodex that included one person that moved to Chicago 2 days before I did, and a couple other people who I had lunch with that are Linfielders. Wasn't a very strong and deep support system, but getting to know these people was really fascinating. All walks of life from all over the world, and I'm still friendly with those folks, with so many of them. And looking back, it was really a tough year working there, but I got so much out of it, and I never would have had that opportunity if I hadn't just picked up and moved. Nobody was going to hire somebody for that type of role
remotely
or clear across the country. You're going to move here for this job, you're not going to stay. So I just had to take the risk, and it paid off.
So now you work at SP Plus. Can you tell us a little bit about what the company does, what your role is there, how you've risen through the ranks?
So maybe I'll take a step back. So I got the job in the mailroom at that insurance brokerage and moved up quickly out of that training program and started working with a team that handled the firm's largest client. And again, knowing nothing about insurance. So I had a group of great mentors who've been in the industry between like 2 and 40 years. And they were very excited about somebody new coming on board. And I would say that the insurance industry is full of a lot of nerdy people who are really passionate and like the details, which is me. And so I learned a lot from those folks. And through a couple acquisitions, I moved over to a different brokerage company, and I was happy doing that kind of work, but the next logical step would have been moving more into like a sales type role. And I really wasn't looking to be in insurance sales at that time. So just like with the Architecture Foundation, I got a phone call one day from a recruiter asking if I was interested in taking on an analyst position at a company called Standard Parking. And I knew of them because it's a big Chicago-based company. And I knew a couple of people who'd been the analyst in that role before. And since I didn't want to go into a sales role, and I thought it was a pretty interesting opportunity, I took the call, and after a couple quick interviews, I started working at Standard Parking as a risk analyst. And I think, again, timing was perfect. I had a new boss, and she had years of experience and had taught me so much. She did not like the culture of the institution, and just wasn't a good fit for us. So she stayed for a couple years, and it was good because we both complement each other. I had a lot of technical insurance experience and a lot of great analytical skills, and she was much more sort of the softer side of the business. And so when she left, I was promoted to Director of Risk Management and basically took over her role. And I've been at that organization. I've been at SP, well, we changed from Standard Parking to SP Plus in 2012. And I've been there since 2006. I'm Vice President of Risk Management now. I have a team, the safety team reports up to me, so we have about a half dozen people whose entire job is to ensure and enhance the safety of our employees and our customers. And another group of people who are focused on insurance and analytical work and providing information to those safety folks to make sure that all of our employees are coming in a certain way and leaving at least that well, as good in that situation or better. But SP Plus is the nation's largest parking and transportation management company. So we operate shuttle buses and manage parking garages in 48 states, 330 cities, 100 airports. We're mostly in the US, some in Canada, and some of our technology products are operating in many airports in Europe, but the meat of our work is done in the continental US. And being there right now for so many years, one of the questions that I get almost every single time I interview somebody, when I give them my spiel about who I am, what I do, almost everybody's like, why did you stay here this long? That's unheard of. And I was like, yes. And I tell them that I've never woken up in the past 18 years and dreaded coming in. I've maybe dreaded a task. I've maybe dreaded a conversation, like a simple finite thing that I just worked through, but I've never got up and disliked my job, disliked anything we do, disliked the people. I'll say that I like what I do, and we laugh a lot on my team, which I think you have to when you're working with safety and risk management. We see some pretty horrific things from time to time, and I'm sure that the gallows humor that is in our team is definitely not appreciated by some people in the workspaces around us, but more often than not, it's HR's coming over to tell us to be quiet because we're laughing and having a good time. And that's why I stay. I stay for the people, and I like what I do. And right now we're being acquired and being taken private, which is full of many changes and lots of concerns from everybody in the organization. But I have no fear, I have no concern that there be any material changes on our team. We've just built a great team of people that have the technical training for what we do, and also a nice mix of people who fell into the industry like me. So when I look at my team, I see people that have insurance and risk management degrees, and I see people who've come through our group who have political science degrees, who have nursing degrees, we've had some English lit majors, and it's great to see that diversity of thought that we get in our team, because we're not just hiring a University of Illinois accountant. I mean, they're great for that role, and Illinois State University has a really great risk management and insurance program. But if I hire the same people, I'm getting the same ideas, and I don't need 6 people to give me the same idea. So I will say there's some folks that when we bring in people that maybe don't have the same educational background that the job description has, the cover letter's great and the initial interview is great. I can teach somebody insurance and risk management. I can't teach them to be inquisitive or ethical or just a good person I can trust to do the right thing. So I just think looking back on the different people we've brought in, I think that diversity of thought has really pushed us forward as an organization. And as I sit now watching the news and hearing people talk about the liberal arts, and they're treating that as a 4-letter word, it frustrates me, because it's not any form of indoctrination. It goes back to what I said from my initial conversation with Don. you can apply what she says about political science to the whole of liberal arts. We're going to teach you to think. We're going to teach you to be a critical thinker and to have communication skills. You might not end up agreeing with the person you're talking to, but you'll understand where they're coming from, and you can articulate your point to them, and you'll be a better global citizen. And it just, I think, makes me sad and frustrates me when you hear some of the attacks on the liberal arts. It just shows that the folks haven't had the same experience, and they're not working with people who have a broad, diverse educational background.
Speaking of being broad and diverse, we're going to go from risk management to wine. So I saw that you have a couple of WSET certifications. Talk to me about your relationship with wine and how all of that got started. And
I don't know where I picked up this term. I hear it all the time now, but a lifelong learner. I'm always curious about everything. I can find myself going down any sort of internet rabbit hole on some topic and being frustrated that I've used up so much time on a certain inquiry. But I think I've always enjoyed wine, but I didn't really know much about it. And growing up in this area, you'd see wineries, but it wasn't as big of a part of the economy as it is now. So I didn't pay any attention to it when I was here. And then got older and work, nonprofit work, you're always having some sort of wine reception, and then business dinners and not really knowing what was going on. And then years go by, just exploring. And then I think it was I got an email about a certification, and I started off with WSET 1, which I think was just a one-day course, and my husband was out of town on a business trip, and I'm like, might as well take part of the weekend and do it, and I loved it. And then I immediately signed up for level 2, which was a longer class. I forget the exact number of hours. And then immediately after I was done with that test, I signed up for level 3, which was, I think, basically every weekend in the month of January. And written work and tasting and doing it in person in Chicago was a really interesting experience because I'm surrounded by mostly people in the wine and hospitality industry. There might have been one other person who was just interested like me. So there are people who were working in the restaurants from the Alinea Group to the Four Seasons to world-class properties, and they've got access to people who, quartermaster sommelier, people who have WSET 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm just some guy who likes to drink some wine and want to know more about it. And I just had a really great time with it. And I do plan on going back and going to level 4, the diploma, but that's more of an 18-month program, and lots of things are going on. So I think that's probably a little farther down the road. But being somebody who's not in the industry, other than on the consumer side, I talk to people all the time about how I learned so much, and it's not a technical program, right? It's not a winemaking program, and it's not a service program like quartermaster sommelier. So you can just do it for yourself. And I try to tell everybody I know who likes wine to at least take one of the classes. And if you pass the test, great. And if you don't, you're not working for a promotion. You're just working for the knowledge. I was very excited because I think it's a great program to get people who maybe aren't deep into the wine industry started and get a better understanding without having certain aspects that maybe aren't really appealing, like court has the service requirements, and I personally don't care how to properly open and serve a bottle of champagne to a table of 6. I'll be doing that at my home, and you'll be happy you're just having a drink with me. You don't need to be done the proper way. but it's that kind of stuff too. I'm always studying something or going, maybe not after a certification of some sort, but I'm always have something in the playbook. So during the pandemic, I went back and got a couple of insurance industry designations. So I'm always looking for something, because if there's that old adage that some managers will say is, I don't want to train my employees because then they'll leave. And if you don't train them, what if they stay? I do not want people who were great 10 years ago on my team. I want people who are great today and will be better tomorrow.
All right. So you've stayed pretty close to Linfield since you graduated, and now you're on the board. So what is it about Linfield that kind of keeps you coming back or makes you want to stay involved?
I think it's two things, really. One, it's the people, and not necessarily the specific people. I mean, I love Dawn, I love working on programs with her. I love working with Jeff, but the other folks who are new since I graduated still have the same passion for the student experience, and seeing that part of Linfield continue and to grow, I just love. And I look back and I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for my Linfield experience. If I had chosen to go to Oregon State, I would not be this Tim. I might be pretty close to it if I went to another liberal arts school in the area, but I wouldn't be the same person. I'm happy with where I am and the people I've met. And I'm a big believer in basically paying it forward. I have a lot of support when I was here from people on campus and off campus, and I want to help people in the same situation. I think back again to my parents who's like, you're gonna go to college, that's it. And we'll figure out how to make it work. And I think there's a lot of people out there, who maybe don't have that type of support. And I wanna be there to help that. And if you can even just help one person get closer to their goals and their dreams, then that's a win. And then surrounding yourself with people that are here at Linfield that have the same mission, we can do a lot together.
Well, what changes have you observed on campus since you graduated in 2001? And what changes do you hope to see in the next 20, 23 years?
The things that haven't changed is still, you walk back on campus and you just have that sense, it's Linfield. When I left in 2001, Keck campus, I think there might have been one class was being held in one of the buildings over here. So this entire part of the campus is new to me. Old part, the traditional part, my part of campus, it just feels like it was back then. So I'm sort of transported back, maybe into a simpler time, maybe. But it has a home feel to me. And I was here right around the time that the old oak fell. I was in Chicago, but I came back to visit family, and I saw that, and I came over there, and I was thinking I was going to have some sort of experience, like, oh my God, and I was like, yeah, it's an old tree and it fell, and that's not great because it's our symbol, and that was the great shade tree during graduation, and I think at that point it was also like, it's a tree, things change, we move on, and if memory serves, for my graduation, we were looking for information to include in one of the speeches one of the students was going to give. And somebody found a poem or some writing from a former student body president from early in the 20th century, talking about the old oak and how it had seen better days. And it's like, oh man, we've been having that conversation since we started, okay. And it's like, I don't want to say it's time for, but it was time, and we moved on. And so I think that was just like a physical change in the institution. And the things that haven't changed, again, are the passion the professors, the administrators have for the students. And I don't see that changing in the future. I think the school will change, but there's such a demographic change going on right now, and I don't think that's going to be a massive long-term continuous issue, but it's a hurdle we have now. I think things I'd like to see change at Linfield for me, and this might just be very selfish, I want to see change in programs that allow every student to have a travel abroad experience. I think that's such a game-changing thing for people, and especially when we're seeing so many of our students, our first-generation students, how many of those people have had the opportunity to take a week and explore Barcelona or go to Tokyo, or you might have visited family abroad, but I think that's a different scenario than a proper educational experience in Europe or South America. And even just a Jan term trip can be such a life-changing experience for a student. I think back to my first trip abroad. I was fortunate enough to go on a high school trip to Spain and a couple other places, and I'd studied Spanish. And you speak Spanish in Spanish class, but when you're in Madrid and all of a sudden it works, and I'm getting directions, and it's not just theory, and these people are living their whole lives in this big city, and they're speaking this language that I understand, and it's just amazing. And you can do that with language, and you can do that with history and art, and it's so much more impactful when you're there seeing it. Technology is great. We can do so many amazing things now, but nothing's going to beat standing in the Louvre in front of the Mona Lisa, or walking along the Great Wall of China. That is a game-changing experience, and that's what I want. I want every student who leaves Linfield to have a stamp in their passport.
Well, those are all the questions I had for you. Is there anything that I forgot to ask or anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Well, we appreciate your time, Tim. Thank you so much.